Hello, Transracial adoption community. My name is Pugs, and I run the Transracial Adoptee Experiences blog and website, where I presume you're watching this video. So I wanted to talk to you today about an experience that I had recently having lunch with a friend of mine at work. And so this friend, whom I'll call Lana for this video, is very much a progressive. She's very much a strong ally and advocate for minorities. She's a strong ally and advocate for LGBTQ rights. She's very much a feminist. She volunteers. She's one of those people who doesn't just seethe in silence. She actually goes out and tries to make a difference in the world. So the story that I want to share in no way is meant to paint Lana in a negative light. We're friends. We're work friends, but we're friends. And I do care about her, and I know that she cares about me. So I'm not trying to say she's bad or chastise or castigate her in any way, shape, or form, because that's very much not what this is about. This is about how all of us, myself included, have blind spots. We have gaps in our experience, gaps in our knowledge that leads us to say or do things that cross a line, that come across as microaggressions, that make people we care about uncomfortable. So we were at lunch, and I was talking to her about the project that I'm doing for graduate school. And I was talking about this particular project, running this blog, talking to transracial adoptees, collecting their stories, and providing a resource for younger transracial adoptees who might be going through that tumultuous identity formation journey, which is hard enough for anybody. You talk to any adolescent, any teenager, you talk to anybody who's been an adolescent or a teenager, and those formative years where you're forming and hammering out and forging your own sense of self, they're difficult. It's hard. It's not an easy thing growing up. It's harder when you have to navigate the world not looking like the people who raised you, not looking like your family. It's harder navigating the world with that layer of adoption, and it brings into question so many different aspects of our identities and makes that identity formation journey that much harder. So I was talking to Lana about this experience of doing this project, and I was sharing with her some bits and pieces from some of the stories that I've gathered from other transracial adoptees. And Lana asked that question. The question that everybody who's involved with transracial adoption has heard or been subjected to in some way, shape, or form at some point. And it wasn't malicious. Like I said, I don't mean to cast her in a negative light. But she asked, had I ever wanted to find my real family? Or if I'd ever looked for my real family? And I was taken aback. I honestly had a moment of intense emotion, a combination of anger and weariness that, oh, this question again. And I had to explain to her, and I had to step back and take a breath. And she saw in my face that she'd said or done something that affected me. And she said, oh, what did I say wrong? Which actually helped dispel some of the emotions that I was feeling. The fact that she would actually ask and recognize that she had made me intensely uncomfortable, and then ask what she had done. But it's that word real. Had I ever wanted to look for, or had I ever looked for my real family? That word real is so loaded. It is so loaded for so many of us in the transracial adoption community. As a transracial adoptee, from that perspective, the word is so loaded because it assumes that I am not a quote unquote real member of my family, the family that raised me. That somehow the biological bonds of a quote unquote real family are somehow more valid than the adoptive bonds of the bonds that I create, or that an adoptee creates with their adoptive family. And to have the validity of my relationship to my family challenged in that way, it's visceral and it hurts. And there's that aspect of it of why would you even ask that question? I know we're friends, but how is it okay to ask that question? How is it okay to challenge the validity of my family and my validity within that family? Because that's so much of what this is about. So much of what this is about is the fact that as a transracial adoptee, I navigate spaces, I walk through spaces, I live in spaces where I don't feel that I belong. I'm not white, but my family is white. I relate to white people because that's who I grew up with in my family. But when I'm in a group of white people who are not my family, I don't quite belong because I present as being Asian. With Asian people, I don't quite fit in because I have zero connection to Asian culture. I was raised in the South Side Chicago Irish tradition, a strong traditional South Side Chicago Irish family. And that's what I know. I don't have the cultural artifacts in my life, in my personality, in my being, in my upbringing of being Asian. Whether as if Asian were a single thing, but in my case, specifically Korean. So when I'm around other Koreans, when I'm around other Asians, I'm not quite Asian enough there. The one place where a person shouldn't feel like they are the other is with their family at home. That should be our safety net. It should be our solitude. It should be a source of strength. It should be a source of nurturing. It should be a source of belonging. And when you ask me about my real family, you're making the assumption, or you're conveying the assumption, that I don't belong with these people who raised me. And that's hurtful. And I know that it wasn't malicious. And I know that Lana didn't mean it to be malicious. So what I hope people take away from this is, for one, that we need to mind our own business. How is it okay? How is it socially okay to ask that question? It's like when we were kids and we'd be at the grocery store because my mom, being a single mother, when she went grocery shopping, that meant all four kids went grocery shopping as well. And my older two siblings are white. And me and my younger sister are both Korean. We were adopted from Korea. And people would come up to my mother and say, "Oh, what a beautiful family." And then point at my younger sister and I and say, "Are they real brother and sister?" How is that any of your business, first of all? And how do you feel okay, socially okay, going up and asking that? So at work, even though Lana and I are friends, we're work friends, but we are friends, how is it okay to challenge my sense of belonging to my family, how is it okay to challenge my sense of family by asking that question? So we need to be a little bit more sensitive um, to when we're crossing those lines, and ask ourselves before we open our mouths, is this actually something okay for me to ask? And yes, I was sharing about the experience of being a transracial adoptee, but there are other ways she could have posed that question. There are other ways she could have approached that topic. There's certainly better words to use than real. She could have asked, hey, let me know if I'm crossing a line. And that gives me a moment to prepare myself. But let me know if I'm crossing a line. But I was curious, have you ever wanted to search for your biological family or your first family? Have you ever had contact with your biological family? Have you ever had contact with your first family? To Lana's credit, she actually did realize that she'd said something that hurt, and she did say, "Oh, I said something wrong. What did I say?" And she did give me a chance by saying that to step back from the very visceral emotional reaction that I was having, and actually explain to her how problematic the word "real" is when you're talking about adoption and adoptive families. And to her further credit, she apologized. And this is what I mean when I say that she actually is one of those progressive people who tries to walk the walk. They don't just spout vitriol or political slogans. They actually try to modify their behavior to reflect their beliefs, which is something we all can learn from, because we all make missteps. We all make mistakes. I've made mistakes with friends of mine, um, and challenged their identity inappropriately. We've all done this in some way, shape, or form at some point. The point is that we all can be a little bit more aware about when it's actually okay to ask questions, and we can think a little bit harder about why the way we ask things and the questions that we ask and the assumptions behind the questions that we ask, why they can be loaded and how they can be hurtful. And we can do a little bit of work on our own to educate ourselves rather than relying on other people to educate us. If Lana had just taken the time to maybe sit and think about the question, maybe she wouldn't have asked it. Maybe she would have realized that saying real is loaded and problematic. Maybe she would have found a different way to ask that question by simply replacing the word real with birth or first. Have you ever wanted to find your first family? Have you ever wanted to look for your birth family? Which is still a little bit none of your business, but at least it doesn't carry the connotation that the family that I do have is somehow less than a biological family. And we see this all throughout our society. We have these little phrases we throw out: blood is thicker than water. Uh, we see in our court system, time and time again, decisions being made to place children and reunite them with their birth families, their biological families, which means that they're shuttled into and out of the foster care system. So, foster families are real. Adoptive families are real. Biological families are real. They're different ways of relating, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is the child. And Is the child in a healthy, safe place where they have love, support, room to grow? They have their basic needs of food and shelter met. So at the end of the day, what's important isn't whether or not a family is real, a biological family. What's important is the child and how happy they are and how healthy they are and what kind of village we can be for the family that's raising that child. And so when we ask questions that other the child and we ask questions about real family, we're not living up to that ideal. We're not living up to that idea of providing a happy, healthy, safe environment for the child. So I just wanted to share this experience with you. I hope that maybe we all can think a little bit more about how we interact with others. We can all think a little bit more about the questions that we ask and the lines that we cross and the accidental missteps that we take. Because, like Lana, most of us are good, well intentioned people. But good intentions don't always cover our blind spots. Good intentions don't always cover the gaps in our knowledge. Good intentions don't always cover our gaps in experience. It's on us to educate ourselves. And yeah, there's going to be gaps in our knowledge. And when we're approaching places where we don't know, maybe we spend a little bit more time trying to understand before we speak. Maybe we think a little bit more about how we phrase things and about the questions we ask and about the context within which we ask them. So I hope this helps. I hope this gives you something to think about. And I hope it's something you can take with you. And for other transracial adoptees, and actually everybody in the transracial adoption community, you're not alone. We all experience these things. And it's hurtful. But knowing that there's a community of people who have similar experiences to you and who go through the same things, who face the same questions, it helps. And I hope that this video helps as well.